Mr. Yo requested that none of the speakers use slides, but I said that as McKinsey, I am completely unable to speak without using slides, so apologies right from the start. First of all, thanks for inviting me here. I have 10 minutes, and there is a big clock here reminding us how much time we are taking. So this particular presentation, or short presentation, is based on a report we published around 2 years ago on India's urbanization. And since then, we have been involved, and I have been personally involved in Mumbai, as well as some of the work we have been doing with the Planning Commission, as well as with Mr. Kamal Nath, the Minister of Urban Development, on the next generation urban schemes. So that's sort of the involvement. Before we go to India, let me just show a couple of charts on the world. And you must have seen a lot of this data before, but I just wanted to put it in perspective. The urban growth traditionally has been 20 times the rural growth throughout the world. So overall, 57% of the world will be urbanized by 2025. And the rural growth obviously is 0.1%, and urban growth is around 2%. So that's the overall urban growth in the world. Out of that, as you will expect, India and China, and the two sessions, parallel sessions going on, are on India and China. India is around 11% and 20% is China. That is the overall urban population. And the share of growth is 26% for China and 14% for India. So 40% of the urban growth going forward is India and China. Now, 4 years ago, we looked at China's urbanization, and 2 years ago, we looked at India's urbanization in around 18-month study that we did on India's urbanization. So 2 years ago, we published the report. And the rest of the presentation is some short summary, something from the report on challenges as well as the opportunities. So really, three messages. One is, and this was important in India at that time, maybe not anymore, the fact that cities are important for India's economic growth. There is a debate, maybe not as much anymore, but there was always a debate in India of cities versus rural areas, cities versus villages. And the fact that cities and villages go together and they are symbiotic was quite important to point out. So in terms of just the economic future, 40% of India will live in cities by 2030, and right now that number is around 30%. So more than 600 million people will live in cities by 2030, and 250 million people will be added to India's urban population in the next 20 years. So it's a pretty massive urban expansion that is going on. In terms of GDP also, around 70% of India's GDP will be in cities. So economically, also it's very, very important. Around 10 states will be more than 50% urbanized. 2 of them are very close to 50% already, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. But there are other 8 which will go beyond 50%. I don't know whether 50% is a magic number politically. Maybe it's not, because it probably depends constituency by constituency. But our sense is that as India starts moving towards 40 and 50%, the traditional neglect that India gave to its cities hopefully will start changing. It's already beginning to change. And Mr. Kamal Nath is in the process of changing that. And Dr. Ishar Ahluwalia, who is sitting in the audience, has also written a report on how to change that. But it's beginning to change, but we have a long way to go. In terms of challenges, I want to be quite honest here. India has not really figured out its urbanization yet. It's beginning to, but not. The challenges are quite massive. And there's just some numbers in a typical McKinsey fashion. 100 liters per day per person is the water. Only 30% of transportation is public transportation. Vehicular congestion, just the traffic jams, is around 170 vehicles per lane kilometer when the target should be 100. Sewage treated is only 30%. Parks and open spaces are low, and slum population is high. It is a massive challenge right now for India and Indian cities. And going forward, and again, I'm not trying to project a bad future just for the sake of it, but we do need to change. And from that perspective, if we don't change, things become worse, as you will expect. You know, the vehicular congestion can go from 170 to 600 cars, which is basically a gridlock, okay? So we do need to change. We do need to make a set of substantial and irreversible changes happen. Obviously, it won't happen overnight. So those are the challenges, and Indian policymakers are beginning to get aware of it. The intelligentsia is already aware of it. The politicians at the state level are beginning to become aware of it. Okay, so that's the good news. So that's the challenges. In terms of opportunities, so that's one side, challenges one side. In terms of opportunities, those will be quite massive, just looking at the numbers, right? So I'll mention a few of them, 4-5 charts on opportunities. Number one is just the dramatic expansion of middle class. From 10 million households to 150 million households in the middle class, and that will change India's consumption patterns. You are already beginning to see that, okay? But this will change quite dramatically. As the next chart shows, that discretionary spending will increase dramatically, and the spending on necessities like food will go down, right? And therefore, whether it's education, recreation, whether it's housing, whether it's transportation, will grow dramatically. And that is a secular change. It will happen no matter how we manage our cities, right? So these opportunities on the consumer front have a force behind it. What about on the urban front? What do we need to do? Really, the report is quite big, and I'm not going to go into all of it. But India needs to fix many things, and I'll talk only about one or two, and each of these things creates opportunities, right? One is funding, the second is planning, right? And the third is housing, and of course there are many others like governance and shape. I won't go into all of it, but in terms of opportunities in purely urban area, let's talk about funding. Our estimate showed, and Dr. Ahluwalia's estimate came quite close, that around $1.2 trillion is needed for India's urban infrastructure, around $60 billion per year for Indian cities. India is not spending even 1/10 of that right now, but there is an attempt to push this upward, and it will get pushed upward. Whether it will reach $60 billion per year, frankly, I don't know. Maybe not immediately, but that push is there. So enormous opportunities in transportation, housing, water, sewerage, and all types of things. Okay, so that is rest assured that Indian urban opportunities will be quite high. In terms of raising this funding, again, I won't go into the details. We think the money will get raised. Already some changes are beginning to happen. We are hoping that the next generation Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, which is the government spending, is at least 3 times bigger. Maybe not, but at least that is the hope. And similarly on land monetization, as well as PPP and debt, there are massive opportunities. Singapore has shown, China has shown on how to monetize land for funding public infrastructure, especially city infrastructure. India needs to learn from that. We think that learning is happening, slowly but surely. In terms of planning, planning is a very, very important part of cities. Indian cities are learning that. For Singapore, and I just did a big urban plan for one of the massive cities in collaboration with a Singaporean agency. So at least 100 cities in India are going to need planning services, 2030 master plans, transportation plans, and so on. So that is another big opportunity for services, the planning part of it. Indian cities badly need it, and expertise is required. Third one is just the portfolio of cities. I won't talk about the whole chart, but at the bottom, a small slice is greenfield cities. Amitabh Kant, who is here, will talk more about it, but we think around 25 million people, close to 20 new cities of 500,000 to 1 million each are required in India, but close to metropolitan areas or close to transportation corridors. Amitabh will talk more about it, but that's a massive opportunity, greenfield cities. Third one. And the fourth one is housing, especially affordable housing. Singapore can teach India a lot on that. There's a very successful housing program here. 2 million houses are required per year. Currently, it's 200,000. So 10 times expansion is required. So that's another massive opportunity. City by city, state by state, it's required. So these are the opportunities. I already talked about challenges. In summary, cities are critical, and there are challenges as well as massive opportunities. It's a decadal transformation. Let's see how the next 20 years unfold. But they are critical for Indian cities. Thank you.